Welcome into the DNVR Rockies Podcast, brought to you, as always, by Strava Craft Coffee. Strava CBD coffee is going to keep you nice and fresh in the morning since it's loaded with CBD, CBG. It's not going to give you those jitters if you want 3 or 4 cups in the morning. Helps with chronic headaches, joint pains, so much more than that. And now, get 25% off your first purchase when you use code DNVR25 at StravaCraftCoffee.com. I'm your host, Patrick Lyons, and joining me on this beautiful day is our good buddy, host of the Drew Goodman Podcast, the voice of the Rockies on AT&T SportsNet. It's Drew Goodman. What's going on, buddy?
Not too much. What's going on with you?
Living the life. That's it. Every day it's filled with baseball, so you can't complain. We're very lucky to get to do what we do.
We're fortunate to do what we do, but we'd like the games to be talked about. And this is the week that spring training was going to commence with pitchers and catchers, and we know it's not. And that's greatly disappointing, to say the least.
Yeah, the Super Bowl, I'm not a huge football guy. I think I've said that before. I really went all in on baseball and my fanhood and my fandomship, where I just said, just give me all the baseball I can handle. But when it comes to the Super Bowl, that's like the end of the football season and the start of the baseball season. And it was a little disappointing to not be able to say after the Rams won and the game was over, hey, now it's officially baseball season. We couldn't actually say that, unfortunately.
No, and I think more frustrating and exasperating is the lethargy of movement in the talks. I mean, they talk for 20 minutes and then it seems like it's another week or two before they sit down for another, 25 minutes. Tremendously disappointing. And as I've said on my podcast, and I've said on your podcast, that there are a lot of people who are going to get hurt financially beyond players and owners. And the game is going to suffer greatly. And in some places, in some corners, will do irreparable damage, because there will be people who leave and don't come back. And you just push baseball at a time of year where they can, somewhat dominate the landscape. It's before the postseasons of the NBA and the NHL, and football is over. Football, like all these sports, try to become a 12-month entity with the, in Indianapolis with the combine, and then the lead up to the draft in April, et cetera. But it's a time that baseball has a chance to dominate, and they're going to miss out on that. And all they are is going to gain multiple black eyes from this if they don't resolve it quickly.
Especially coming off the heels of the pandemic too, where you understand why we didn't have baseball until July, and that was fine. But yeah, obviously it's a much different situation, and your heart goes out to all those, stadium workers. We'll see what happens if opening day gets pushed back. We're still holding out on hope. There's, we still have a couple weeks until we know if opening day will go down or not. But hey, there's plenty of people who work at the ballparks down in Arizona and Florida that will be impacted like that, and so that's disappointing. But we will have pitchers and catchers on March 1st for the minor leaguers, and I've never been more excited for minor league baseball before than right now. And that might be one of the positives, is that people do pay more attention to the minor leagues, because I know you have interest in it, but I've always loved it. Where I grew up in New Jersey, we were an hour outside of Philly in New York, so minor league baseball was the only thing around that was easy, where it wasn't that far of a drive. It was much more affordable, and I think that's a big introduction for a lot of people in the U.S. is minor league baseball. So I hope something positive comes from that, because it's a great sport, and minor league baseball is really where it's at its most unique and basic and beautiful, really.
Well, so is college baseball. And here in Colorado, from a Division I standpoint, everybody always talks about Division I. The only programs that play at that level, Northern Colorado, UNC, and the Air Force Academy. But, and this is a big but, baseball, I always say this in terms of the difference in talent from D1 to D3, NAIA, junior college, it's really like this as opposed to like this in football and basketball. And the RMAC is an outstanding Division II league, led by year in and year out one of the best teams in the country in Colorado Mesa. So you have Metro State under Ryan Strain. They do a great job. Colorado, Robbie Bales up at, School of Mines, terrific job. Dave Hadjic down at UCCS. There's new coaching staff down at CSU Pueblo. You have Colorado Christian, Adams State. My point is, I went out, I think I mentioned this on the podcast last week. I went out and caught Metro State playing Minot State last week. Really good college ball. So if you're jonesing for a baseball fix before the high schools get going, go on out and catch an RMAC game here in town. There's plenty of them, and they've already started. So that's an option for you, and a good option.
And that's a great point too. I think that's something that maybe some baseball people or sports fans might not understand is that separation between junior colleges and some of the Division I schools, because a lot of the D1 schools, they tap into the junior college circuit to get some of their best players. I mean, we saw that with Sam Hilliard, before he ended up going to Wichita State. So it's a good feeder program. And so, yeah, minor league baseball will get a little bit more attention, and as will college baseball. I know I've been pulling up the schedule, to see when UNC Bears are going to be in town to check out some of their games, when it gets warm enough, at least. But we get plenty of sun here, where as long as there's no snow on the field, those guys can grit it out. And looking forward to seeing some college baseball in Colorado.
Listen, they clear fields quickly. So even if it snows, on a Thursday, afternoon, they can have that field ready Friday. But if it's turf, and a lot of the schools do play on turf. A lot of the colleges, at least, play on turf, and you'll be pleasantly surprised if you're unfamiliar with varying levels of college baseball, how good it is, and guys who end up playing professionally. Unlike football and basketball, there are a good number of players that emanate from the varying levels in baseball. It's not just, did you play in a Power 5 school? I'm not saying, those guys are going to have typically, more talent and more ultimately professional talent, but there are plenty, and I mean plenty, not a guy here or a guy there, but there are plenty of players that populate minor league and big league rosters also that played Division II or even Division III baseball in college.
Yeah, we saw Joshua Fuentes obviously do it as an undrafted free agent, and a guy that's really high up in the Rockies, top prospect lists, is a Division II player out of Shepherdsburg, West Virginia, Brenton Doyle.
Yeah.
Shepherd, yeah, you go. Brenton Doyle, who won a minor league Gold Glove last year, and so yeah, such great talent. And Steve G asked a question here in our live chat. Again, if you're listening to this as a podcast, head on over to the DNVR Sports channel on YouTube. Question about how does the bullpen look this year? It's very timely that you bring this up, because a guy that I banged the drum a little bit at the beginning of the offseason, haven't talked about him a lot. He wasn't added to the 40-man this year, but he's a player who went to Regis Jesuit High School, went to Colorado Mesa, was selected in the mid-30s, but had a fantastic year at Hartford and AAA Albuquerque. Reagan Todd, and he's a lefty that I think is going to contribute to the bullpen. Much like last year, we saw that influx of young guys, where it's Julian Fernandez, Justin Lawrence, Ben Bowden, Jordan Sheffield, Lucas Gilbert. There's 5 rookie relievers. I think, although he's not on the 40-man right now, one of those Colorado kids who came through the RMAC in Reagan Todd, I think he's going to contribute a lot to the bullpen this year.
Yeah, Regis High School product. I know Reagan. I'm really thrilled for his advancement. He's battled some injuries in his career, as seemingly every pitcher does, but his head's right. He's got a chance to be impactful, and I'm really excited about seeing where he's able to progress to in 2022. To answer that gentleman's larger question, I think when people talk about the perspectives of a team, it's hard to answer that in a definitive manner, because we don't know what the roster will look like or how it's augmented once this lockout is settled, in that there's going to be a free agent frenzy. So, I mean, are the Rockies able to sign an impactful bat? Are they able to sign 2 impactful bats? Do they sign a bullpen arm? Do they make a move? So it's hard to, just say, "How this is what it looks like." We don't know fully what it looks like. I'm glad you mentioned some of those guys like a Jordan Sheffield, Patrick, because they do have some young, talented arms that you hope are ascending. And Jordan Sheffield, there were a lot of bright moments last year. I know he missed a huge chunk of time with, I think it was a lat injury, but this is a guy that they were concerned. The reason he was a Rule 5 selection of the Dodger organization is he didn't throw enough strikes. By and large, after a rough beginning in spring training, he did throw a lot of strikes in live games at the major league level during the regular season. So I'm excited about him. There's a group of guys that should be better. Lucas Gilbreth was really good in the final couple of months of the season. He should be better, one would hope, this year because of the experience for the first time at the big league level. So that group is going to be interesting. But yeah, hopefully you're able to augment it as well once this whole thing is settled.
I said at the beginning of last season that when we were talking about, what the strengths of the 2021 Rockies would be. And of course, we'll get to our big topic, the multiverse of what if back in 2020. So we do have a couple questions here in the chat from Eric and Bad Flounder all about that. But I did say at the beginning of last season, obviously the rotation we knew was going to be the biggest strength. But I did think that the bullpen was going to be sneaky good. And I regretted that during the first half of the year because so many of those young guys, they were getting their feet wet. But then in the second half of the year, they proved me right, and I felt a lot better about my prediction because they did step up, and we did see Lucas Gilbreth really, put up some elite type numbers, especially, for a left-hander. I think it was only Aaron Loop really had better numbers than Gilbreth did in the second half after the All-Star break. So yeah, there's a lot of promise in the bullpen, and there's still some really good guys that had some good numbers last year at Albuquerque, whether it's Chad Smith, Jesus Tinoco is now back in the fold. So while certainly that's an area that every team has as a weakness and would like to add to, even if the Rockies don't add to that bullpen, I think there's enough to say, they can still probably get by the way they did in 2021 with shuffling and optioning guys back and forth down to Albuquerque and seeing, hey, who sticks? Hey, if Sheffield can throw strikes, he's going to be all right. And he was, when Julian Fernandez was able to throw strikes, he was pretty dominant with that 102, what was it, 102 or 103 mile an hour fastball?
Yeah, it was some there in there. And I know in most of his ensuing appearances, he was more 90, 96, 97, still a good arm. But, the adrenaline of that first outing where he was consistently well into triple digits, was interesting. I'll give you another guy because I've always felt with a lot of bullpen arms, it's one good, one bad, one good, or one good, one, and then maybe another good year. Yency Almonte was really good in the shortened 2020 season, struggled last year, so he's a candidate to bounce back because he has a good arm, he has plus slider. He fell behind in counts last year. And, was not nearly as consistent as he was a year ago, but he'd be a candidate to bounce back. Tyler Kinley, not a great first half of the year. The last couple of months of the season, he was very good. And, he's a tough guy. I would say another bounce back candidate is Daniel Bard. What did he learn? He's a thinking man's pitcher in addition to a guy who has a big arm. And he really had issues getting left-handed bats out. So what did he learn looking at the tape, having, an offseason to reflect on how he's going to attack left-handed batters? Because, upper 90s with a, 91 mile an hour slider, that's an unusual cat. And it's not about not throwing enough strikes as it was for a long period of time to the point where he, almost had the yips from a pitching standpoint and was out of the game. That's not the issue. Now he's got to be able to consistently get ahead of left-handers and get left-handers out. So he also would be a candidate with a big arm to have a bounce back season.
Yeah, you can really project with the bullpen and say, hey, if things work out well for this guy, you've got a lot of depth in that bullpen and as many guys as you're going to need for that, like you said, where you don't know if you're going to have it one day. But if you can have 10 guys that you say, if all goes well, you're going to have a strong bullpen. Well, that's great, because if only 5 of them work out, guess what? 5 guys that you can rely upon for the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th and rotate through those guys. That's going to be, critical for 162 game season.
You can't have enough quality arms. We know that. And the other thing that I so often repeat this time of year is that you're going to have, good stories and some not so good stories. And you need to have, and you're going to have questions. And the more questions that you answer in an affirmative manner, when you and I are talking in August and evaluating where the Rockies are and why, if some of these questions, again, are answered in a positive manner, then you're like probably better, than you'd hope to be maybe, and have a team that, potentially is contending versus, well, we thought this guy was going to do this, and unfortunately it went the other way. This guy went the other way. So you need some positive stories, more positive stories. I know it's obvious than negative stories, but there's always going to be questions, especially in the game of baseball when it comes to performance, because it's inconsistent, especially with pitchers. But you're going to need that as the season unfolds, and hopefully it's still 162 games.
If the question is, what do I get with my membership to the DNVR.com? The answer is going to be a member-sized beer when you're hanging out on the corner of Colfax, New York at the DNVR bar. The answer is also discounts at DNVR Locker. In fact, if you're a new member, your annual membership gets you a free shirt at the DNVRlocker.com. You also get a members-only Discord where you can ask all the hosts and the other members wonderful questions. You don't have to worry about politics or anything like that. There's always deals of the week where you can get discounts on all kind of stuff. So many different events that we have going on at our watch parties. And again, that member-sized beer is doing a lot of heavy lifting that we love, besides all of our great content on the Broncos, Avs, Nuggets, Rams, Buffs, rugby, and now we got the Colorado Rapids. Drew, have you ever done a game for the Rapids before? Have you ever done soccer? No.
Nope.
You don't feel too broken up about that? Like that was a missed opportunity?
I enjoy all sports, and
Sure.
I guess pride myself on career-wise on my versatility, because I've called a great number of sports, but the one sport or one of the sports that I haven't done, and certainly maybe number one in the world, is soccer. I didn't grow up with it, and I guess thusly I've never done it. And there are other sports that are less mainstream that you can kind of learn on the fly a little bit and fake your way through it, so to speak. Not that you ever want to do that, but with soccer, that's a sport you have to have watched and studied and et cetera. And never in my career was it presented as something that, well, boy, I better learn this because there's going to be an opportunity. So no,
I have a buddy that's kind of been in a similar shoes, and he had to fake his way through gymnastics. And I was like, okay, hey, that's impressive to be able to do that. You're also not necessarily calling it on the fly for 90 straight minutes with all the action. So you can get away with it in some sports.
Yeah, a lot of those Olympic sports, I've done gymnastics and swimming and diving and all, and many of those sports, and you're going to rely even more heavily on the analyst,
right?
And it's really a setup. It's really now on the floor exercise, Patrick Lyons, let's say it's a collegiate thing, junior from Penn State, all Big Ten a year ago. And then you lay out and let the experts say, well, that's a double, whatever, and into a quadruple this. And, you're not, it's kind of like figure skating. It's almost like I did a lot of tennis back a number of years ago. And tennis, I do know tennis, but the best policy there is just lay out. It's you're speaking, very infrequently. And if there's going to be an analysis of the point or a particular stroke or strategy, that's going to come from the person sitting next to you. So that's most of the Olympic sports, I think, are handled that way. They're different than, football, basketball, baseball, hockey.
My back is hurting just thinking about taking a double whatever into a quadruple so-and-so. I'm getting very sore. But a sport I do know, a lot about, basketball. It's good timing because Hoops fans have a latest offer from DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. It's a deal that's too good to pass up. New customers can now bet just $1 on any team and get $150 in free bets if they win. It's that simple. DraftKings Sportsbook customers can also bet on the NBA with same-game parlays. You did it for the NFL. Now you can do it in the NBA, where you combine multiple bets from the same game, so that the more legs that you end up adding, the more money you win overall. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. And best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code DNVR. Bet just $1 on any NBA team and get $150 in free bets if they win. That's promo code DNVR at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only, new customers only, minimum $5 deposit. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. A little disappointed you haven't been able to watch Nuggets and Avs. Guess what? Evoca TV is a totally new paradigm for TV delivery that's less expensive and more efficient, while offering you a superior picture than some of those legacy providers. Evoca TV includes local networks like Altitude Sports and other national channels, with being more added to the lineup each and every day. Services are now available in Denver, Colorado Springs, and Phoenix, as well as other Rocky Mountain markets like Boise and Twin Falls, Idaho. In Denver, though, Evoca TV uses next-gen broadcast technology that allows for vibrant picture quality using far less bandwidth than streaming services. And yeah, you can still access next-gen broadcasts on ABC, NBC, Fox, CW. Most importantly, did I mention Evoca TV has Altitude Sports? Look, they make it easy to follow Colorado teams you love, including Nuggets, Avalanche, Rapids, Mammoth. Plus, you'll get access to the Rams, DU Pioneers, and baseball too. How do you sign up for Evoca TV? Just go to evoca.tv/DNVR. That's evoca.tv/DNVR. And at only $25 per month plus receiver, you don't have to worry about a contract, no hidden fees. The price is locked in for 2 years. You can have all of your Denver sports once and for all. In the chat, Drew, we have someone, I don't know that I remember this as being a rumor. Maybe this was just wishful thinking. Was there a time in which possibly Bob Gephardt could have had Hall of Famer Pedro Martinez on the Rockies? Does that sound like something that was ever kicked around, or is that just wishful thinking?
I would have to ask. I would have to ask Geb that. I'm not aware of, if there was some sort of deal that was imminent.
Yeah, a lot of those fans can be GMs and wishful thinking, and hey, you never know if something like that can happen. But our what do you know? We'll talk about today goes back to 2020, when the Rockies had the best record in all of baseball. Again, this was the pandemic season. We didn't have spring training. We had summer camp. We may get familiar with that phrase once again. We'll see what happens. But we had summer camp. Season finally got started on July 23rd, the only time that opening day was on my birthday. And I hope it will stay the only time that opening day and opening night was on my birthday. And Rockies got off to a super hot start. I know they played Oakland. They played Texas. In fact, I think they opened in Texas, right? It was the first game ever at the new stadium, Globe Life Field. I think Daniel Murphy had the first hit at Globe Life Field. And they went 11-3, had the best record in baseball, and from that point the wheels fell off. They went 13-23 for the rest of the season, and Nolan Arenado is traded in the offseason. We're now seeing Trevor Story likely headed elsewhere. John Gray is now signed with the Texas Rangers. So the big what if that we kind of supposed last week as we closed out the show was, what could have possibly happened had things gone differently, where Rockies win 26 games, 26-34. We know 29 got the Marlins and Cleveland into the postseason. So what would it have meant for the Rockies to have gotten into the postseason that year? What would have been different?
Well, I could tell you off the top, just from a sequential standpoint, it would have meant the Rockies were in the postseason 3 out of 4 years, 17, 18, and 20, which in the offseason of 20 would have made, even if Nolan Arenado was feeling the same way, it would have made him look particularly foolish if he were to articulate, I want to win a championship, I want to play for a winner, because everybody would go timeout. How many teams have been to the postseason 3 out of 4 years? I mean, that's hard to do. Even, outside of the Yankees, outside of this run by the Dodgers, it's really hard to do that. Even if you're deep pocketed team. So that narrative would have changed. I'm not sure if, privately he would have said, hey, I feel like, I thought we were going to do more in the off season, that sort of thing. But I was thinking about this, and I know you and I chatted about it off air last week a bit, but had they just hung in there, I mean, 29 wins gets you in. Houston also at 29 wins played in the postseason that year. And I get it. It was a 60 game, hopefully we never see anything like that again, season. But it still counted. And yes, you had a bigger field going to the postseason, but it would have been 3 out of 4 years. And maybe Nolan's less disgruntled. Maybe the relationship doesn't deteriorate to the point that he's traded. Maybe it does. I don't know. But it could have set the course for 21 and where we're sitting right now, 22, differently. And I think we haven't talked a lot about that. And they were sitting pretty. They were 11-3. I mean, you have to be at that point. You've played a quarter of your season, basically, right? And you don't even have to be 500 the rest of the way. You just got to hang in there and not be a disaster. And unfortunately, their record was disastrous the next 46 games.
And to your point about having less credence, or for Nolan having to have less credence with them making the postseason 3 out of 4 years, you also have the fact that at the time, general manager Jeff Bridich did go out at that trade deadline and acquired center fielder Kevin Pillar, who played really well, and a setup man in Michael Givens, who did struggle. But regardless, you say, hey, we brought in 2 guys. I mean, that's what they did in 2017. They brought in Lucroy, they brought in Neshek. Same thing in 2018 when they went to the postseason, where they brought in Sung-Hwan Oh and Matt Holliday, and you could also throw Drew Butera into that mix. And so you say, look, everything is very much the same in one sense. You understand, where Nolan was coming from to a degree, but again, a lot less credence can be given to this claims of, hey, this is somehow a team that's rebuilding. It's postseason 3 out of 4 years, and that's really what I think Jeff Bridich at the time, when he first took over the job and took over the reins, was to try to build, somewhat of a dynasty. Nowadays, the dynasty that you can hope for is going to the postseason a 75% of the time in a 4 or 5 year span. And he ultimately would have been able to do that from 17 to 2020, 3 out of 4 years, and really kind of do what he was setting out to do. And, it definitely would have been much different time.
It would have been a much different time, potentially. And maybe Nolan sticks around, though his contract was going to be onerous no matter what.
Sure.
And I think the Rockies historically have tried to keep their superstars in the fold. And now the last couple of years, we've seen an exodus. We've seen the trade of Nolan, the seemingly imminent departure of Trevor Story through free agency. You go back, though, they signed Nolan to a huge deal with $265 million. They going way back, they signed Tulowitzki, they signed Helton. They tried to keep their mega stars. They even tried to do it, but couldn't come to an agreement with Matt Holliday. I believe they offered Holliday $120 million back then, somewhere in that neighborhood was my understanding, at least. I think they have to be more prudent going forward, Patrick, understanding, whether it's realistic financially to sign that player. And if not, it becomes a business, and it can become cold and it can disappoint fans, but your job is to win as many games as possible. And if you hamstring your franchise because you're overloaded financially with 1 or 2 guys, and the fans are happy when that player signs and there's a press conference, and then you say, okay, well, we're still not very good. It's to put a winning team out there, and it's been convenient because of their success to always point to Tampa. Tampa is not at all afraid to part with guys that became household names in the Tampa St. Pete area, going back to Evan Longoria, going back to Blake Snell more recently. And you say, wait a second, these guys, are moved in their primes, but they do that. They usually get heavy return, and they remain, as we know, an elite team when it comes to wins and losses. And I think the Rockies are going to have to follow that, game plan, if you will, on a regular basis moving forward. And you can't just fall overly in love with guys that were raised a Rocky. And if you don't think you can keep them, you got to get something for them. And let me add something really quickly, Patrick.
Please.
One of the things that looks like it's coming out that the owners have acquiesced on is that if you lose a player to free agency, like the Rockies look like they're going to lose Trevor Story, and they gave him a qualifying offer, they're going to get a draft pick. That looks like it may be going away, which is going to put even more of an emphasis on, if you don't think you can sign him, and you got to have conversations and really feel like, make a decision in June or July at the latest, then you have to trade those guys. And so there may be more trades that take place, and you're going to really have to take a good temperature of that player and what it'll take. Is it doable? And does it make sense to do it if you do think it's doable?
Yeah, Tampa Bay definitely does the best with that. And I think their fans, and I know they have a much smaller fan base, but even just baseball fans, and I think sports fans are intelligent enough to know that, look, that's the way that they're able to stay competitive, is before the player reaches free agency. If you look at it as an asset, not the human as an asset, but the contract and the skills and abilities of that player, that you have to have that high turnover of players. I mean, you can go back and look at the Chris Archer deal. I mean, he's back with Tampa and Pittsburgh. They said, all right, we're going to go all in. If we add this guy on a very team-friendly contract, he's going to make the difference. And the Rays are still reaping the benefits in the form of Tyler Glasnow, Austin Meadows, and even Shane Baz that we got to see there in the postseason. So they got 3 players just as good, if not better, than Chris Archer, than the actual player that they gave up. And so you have to be creative in that way. And you can still be active on the, free agent market, just probably not as much. Like Tampa, they brought in Charlie Morton in the past. I think Corey Kluber signed down there, I believe, right? Michael Wacha. So you can still supplement, but more on a short-term basis, and understand that, look, you gotta give a little to get a little, and you might not be able to keep your guys for the duration of their career, like with Todd Helton or even a Carlos Gonzalez, who also got one of those long-term deals.
Yeah, and I'll point another player out. I think the downturn that the Rockies are currently in began when they didn't offer a deal to DJ LeMahieu. And I think they underestimated the impact DJ had not only on the field, but in that clubhouse. And Dick Monfort came out, I think it was a year ago, somewhere in that time frame, and said just as much, that that's really one that he'd like a do-over on. And so then it was DJ, and then obviously they didn't maintain solid play after the 11-3 start in the 2020 season, and now Nolan and Trevor depart. So now you have to remake your club, especially offensively, and I think show the fans, in addition, that you have a game plan moving forward to start winning more games, and also to let people in the industry, players in the industry, know that it's going to be run differently, that not every name, decent name, is going to become unhappy with the organization and ultimately depart. So that's something that Bill Schmidt internally has, getting everybody on the same page. And I think internally, from all indications, he's done that, and everybody, as he said, pulling on the rope in the same direction. But now you're going to have to, go out there and demonstrate that in the real world with moves and ultimately with wins, because in any sport, it always comes down to that. It comes down to, you win more than you lose. It solves a lot of issues.
You mentioned the DJ LeMahieu business. That's another one of those what ifs, where if LeMahieu was slotted in there at second base, you'd had Ryan McMahon as a first baseman. And sure, that means maybe you're wasting a Gold Glove caliber defensive third baseman. But if you still got Nolan over there, you got McMahon at first base. He's a little bit more settled. And what happens to his career and his trajectory? Because we know that, being bounced on, it's hard being a utility player. I mean, Ben Zobrist maybe he was overpaid a little bit when he went to Chicago, but there's only a few amount of players that can perform at a really high level when they go into the clubhouse every day and they don't know where they're going to be hitting in the lineup and they don't know what position they're going to play. And it's kind of with the idea that, hey, maybe Chris Bryant will come to Colorado. If you go out and you're spending $160 million on Chris Bryant, I don't think he's playing left field one day and then third base and then center field and maybe first base. That will happen over the course of a season, but I don't think he's permanently a utility player if you're spending more money on him than anyone else. So I think, again, LeMahieu's back. Ryan McMahon is going to have, a much different future. We just never know, but it certainly is an interesting thing to surmise and hypothesize on.
Yes. There's no way of telling, as we talked about, what would have happened had they made the postseason in 20, maybe make a little bit of a run. I do feel comfortable saying, at least publicly, you would look very foolish, anyone, to question a team after they were in the postseason 3 out of 4 years, or question, hey, I want to win. I just want to be with the winner. People would kind of look at you with a raised eyebrow, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, Story and Gray, we're still on this roster in 2021. So again, the team looks a lot different with Nolan Arenado still around on the roster. Drew.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this, it looks a lot different. We're talking about the rhetoric of what we know took place in the offseason and the deterioration of a relationship between a cornerstone of your franchise and the front office at the time. But it doesn't change the fact that even in 2020 and going back 2019 and even really 2018, you can look no further than the postseason disappointment after they beat Chicago in 13 innings to scoring only 2 runs in what became a 3-game sweep by Milwaukee. They've been deficient offensively, and that was when they had Nolan. That's when they had Trevor, and for a year it's when they had DJ LeMahieu also. So even if Nolan had never left town and the Rockies never moved him to St. Louis, this would be an offense right now that in this offseason, they would be hunting bats. That would not change.
Agree wholeheartedly on that. I'm hoping you're going to agree, Drew, that you might want to add some athletic greens to the diet. It's a great way to start your day. I've been using it, and it's made me feel a lot more confident in possibly running a marathon or 2 this year. I got to look and plan the schedule. Again, it's how I start my day, and so it's gotten me feeling a lot more upbeat with that 1 scoop of athletic greens that helps my body absorb 75 high-quality vitamins, whole food stored superfoods, probiotics, minerals, adaptogens. It helps me start my day off right. Gives me a lot of mental clarity and alertness, positive gut health, because once your gut is not doing so well, it's usually too late. But athletic greens for me has become this micro habit with big benefits. It's the one thing I can do every day, first thing in the morning, to help take care of myself and put me in the black, put me in the positive rather than in the red and the negative as soon as I wake up. Now, to make it easy for you guys out there, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is visit them at athleticgreens.com/ROC, the first 3 letters in Rockies. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/ROC to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. First step to good health is actually taking care of your mouth. It's really true. And the folks at Green Mountain Dental Group have been pivotal in keeping those of us at DNVR in great shape in this capacity. So now, when you schedule a cleaning, x-ray, and exam, Green Mountain Dental Group is going to give you a free Sonicare toothbrush. That's Green Mountain Dental Group, located only 15 minutes from downtown Denver. Drew, one of the questions and one of the topics here going on in the chat, such great engagement from everybody enjoying the DNVR Sports channel over on YouTube, is, we brought him up, Pat Neshek. Do you have a couple relievers that you can recall, and maybe Neshek is one of them, that when they come into the game, it's going to be, well, if it's not exciting, it's certainly going to be interesting, or you just like to see them work and do their job? Again, you do it in small spurts. It's usually 1 inning at a time. And look, sometimes there's been a couple guys when they go to the bullpen in between innings, us in the press box, we might laugh and snicker and say, well, this is going to be an adventure. So, that might not be a positive thing, but it certainly does make it interesting. Would you put Neshek on that list? Who are some of those guys that might tick off those boxes?
Or do you mean like had supreme confidence when they came in, or made it interesting because they get outs, but they also create traffic?
Yes.
Well, I've seen a lot of those guys, throughout baseball, not just with the Rockies, where, all right, listen, Bard became that last year. I'm not picking on Daniel, but, he became that where, okay, there's going to be a hit, there's going to be a walk, there's going to be base runners, there's going to be deep counts. This is going to be could be a roller coaster ride. There were very few, clean 1, 2, 3 innings, 10, 12, 14 pitches, and you're shaking hands. So it's a tough task, especially when you're pitching in the 8th and 9th inning. There's a long list of guys that you got your money's worth when they went to the mound from an entertainment standpoint, good and bad.
I always thought Ottavino was always entertaining. At sometimes, there'd be a little bit of traffic, but he'd always keep it interesting, especially if there was a runner on base. If he threw one in the dirt, whatever it may be. But he was exciting, and he was electric too, or he was dominant.
Yeah, I mean, he had his moments to your point where, whoa, I mean, I remember one time he had an outing where he threw more balls to the backstop than he did hitting the catcher's glove. But he also had some long periods where he was unhittable. And it was, when he came in, I wasn't worried about a walk. I wasn't worried about a hit. I was like, he's going to dominate. And he has had a good long career as a top setup man. And, he was originally a number 1 pick out of Northeastern, and he was a starting pitcher, and he got converted to a short guy. It's so hard to point to relievers that pitched in high leverage situations and were able to repeat it year after year after year and didn't have some hiccups along the way. So a lot of those guys, they got high end stuff, and there's going to be a walk in there. They get used a lot. You never, they don't come out and say, hey, really, I'm 80% today. They just take the baseball. I mean, there's a great pride thing when your bullpen phone rings and you're not going to say, hey, I'm down today. A lot of times the manager, along with the trainer, has to suggest, you know what, this guy's down today. And a player may go, no, I'm good. And especially in the middle of the season, the manager will stay away from that particular pitcher. But I think all relievers typically, go through periods where it's a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, great career. Not bad for a guy who was selected off of waivers from the Cardinals. So, hey, and Otto's a free agent too. So, hey, maybe he's one of those guys that comes back. That obviously would be very exciting.
Yeah, one of my favorite Rockies, deep thinker, bright guy, interesting guy. And as I said, there's somebody, when this whole thing comes to an end, somebody's going to grab Adam Ottavino. I mean, he's not done pitching at the big league level.
If he comes back to the Rockies, we'll have to see if he can, throw a bullpen at the bar on Colfax, New York, because we know he likes to throw indoors. And if you remember that story a couple off seasons ago, inside of a building there in Manhattan. So we'll see if we could throw a little bullpen session. We might have 60 feet 6 inches. We might have enough in the bar. We'll have to make that work.
I'm trying to think. You may have to move some tables around, though.
Oh, yeah.
Move some tables around. Question is, who's going to catch him?
I don't know. We'll have to get Mooney. We'll have to get Munoz in.
Yeah, you better bring somebody with experience behind the plate.
Very true. All right. Well, a couple weeks ago, I don't know if you saw this. I don't know if it was a troll job, but we'll break it down. ESPN ranked the top 100 baseball players of all time, and their top list, their top 10 list, can't really argue with it. Number 10, Stan Musial, Walter Johnson, Barry Bonds, Mickey Mantle, Lou Gehrig. Number 5, Ted Williams, Ty Cobb, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Babe Ruth. Yeah, I mean, those are about the 10 greatest ball players of all time. But they had a couple, more modern players that we'll look at now and break break down, we'll have a little bit of a face-off. And number 100 on their list was Barry Larkin, which I thought maybe was a little bit curious, but maybe even more curious, I don't know, was number 94, Bryce Harper. So is Bryce Harper already now one of the top 100 players of all time? And if not, are you putting him above Barry Larkin? Obviously play different positions, but what's your take on hearing that Larkin makes the top 100 as the last guy, and then Bryce Harper, he's already in there at number 94?
Yeah, I understand Barry Larkin is a Hall of Famer. For me, if they played at the same time, I would prefer to have Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper is such an impactful bat, and you're talking about a very young player that's already won 2 MVP awards.
True.
Larkin won an MVP award in a year that probably Dante Bichette, quite honestly, should have won it.
Preach.
So I have no issue with a guy who's won 2 MVP awards in his 20s being on that list as a top 100 guy. This is a lethal bat, and he's also been a good defender by and large in the outfield. But that's secondary to me, because that is a middle of the order bat on any team, in any league, in any era. So I have no issue with him coming in. You said at 94. Barry Larkin, top 100. I mean, I guarantee you, there's probably another 50 or 100 players you could say, well, I can make a case in front of a Barry Larkin. And it's not to diminish Barry Larkin as a baseball player. It's just, for me, it probably at first glance, without breaking down numbers, because this is the first you and I have talked about this, and I would say that he's probably a borderline guy.
Yeah, that was my takeaway from it too, where I was a little bit shocked. Again, he's a Hall of Famer. He's great, and I did hear a story where someone in Cooperstown said, like, man, I can't believe I don't feel comfortable in this room. It was a reporter, and Barry Larkin said, yeah, me too. Like, he didn't even feel like he belonged. So you like that, humility that he has. But
yeah,
I think Harper probably would maybe be ahead of Larkin by a little bit, but I might have both of those guys just outside the top 100. I don't know exactly who I would slot in front without going down the list and bleeding over it. But I think for me, it's hard to contextualize Bryce Harper's career from the aspect that, the expectations for him were so ridiculously high. And in some ways,
come through,
maybe
Patrick, and he's come through.
I want to say in some ways he's fallen flat of it. But when you talk about the 2 MVPs, that's on par for being, an all-time great. So it's hard because, again, with the hype, it's the same thing with Zach Veen. Like, where does he have to win an MVP to meet the hype? It's hard. It's just so subjective in so many ways. But Bryce Harper, and again, his career is still going on. I think the thing with Bryce Harper is he was on the scene before Mike Trout, and then Mike Trout passed him up tenfold. But hey, Harper's still going strong, and so yeah, when it's all said and done, Bryce Harper will probably be in the top 100 without a doubt.
Well, see, again, I mean, that's a beautiful thing about baseball. It's a beautiful thing about your show, because you debate different things, Patrick. And for me, I just quickly got on his baseball reference page, and he has an OPS plus in his career, and this is his age 29 season that he'll be embarking on. So he's got a lot of good baseball left. He's got 100. He's a 142 OPS plus, so he's 42% better than average already in his career. 2 MVP awards, 6-time All-Star. I have no problem without. I don't have the context of going, hey, here's the first 20 names that were left off the list, comparing and contrasting. But if you said, is Bryce Harper feel like a top 100 player all time? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Rookie of the year at 19 years old.
Yeah, that's why to me
he started that game.
He's absolutely lived up to the immense and over the top projections, considering he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated as a 16-year-old. I mean, he's lived up to it.
No, very, very true. I do think about, the Nationals having won the World Series as soon as Harper moves on. Again, not necessarily as a knock on him,
that's not his fault.
That's true. That's true. it's part of that conversation. And so, hey, look, I was a big Bryce Harper fan. I think I saw him. I don't know if he was 18 or 19 at the time, but I went out to my local ballpark for the Jersey Shore Blue Claws to see him play when he was with the Hagerstown Suns, where, you had to see this kid. He's one of the few guys that you'd have bought a ticket at a minor league game just to see him. It's probably Bryce Harper and then Tim Tebow. Might be 1 and 2 when it comes to going to see a minor league ball player. So yeah, Bryce Harper is one of those dudes for sure.
He's got a career OPS of 916. You think there's I know on that list top 100 there's a bunch of pitchers obviously as well. Do you think there's 50 players who have a higher career OPS than 916? No way. Right? I don't think.
No, absolutely. No, and again, of his time and of his era, I think, again, when there's so much hype on a guy, you start thinking about the all-time perspective, and maybe that's where I'm going wrong. Maybe that's where I might be skewing things against him, because just compared to his peers, yes, absolutely, he has been one of the greatest of his generations. And he might only be halfway through his career. We know he's contractually only halfway through his career, because I think he still has 10 more seasons in Philadelphia. So hats off to him. All right. Next one.
Because I did this really quickly. I want to see if I was right.
Actually, I got you heated up over Harper here.
Actually, Bryce Harper comes in 56th right now, all time in OPS. So I thought it'd be, would there be 50? Mike Piazza's number 50 at 920, rounding off 922. But Albert Pujols is it 918, 53, 53rd all time. So I mean, the people around Bryce Harper, Jason Giambi's right in front of him. Pujols a couple of spots in front of him. 5 spots in front of him. Miguel Cabrera. That's pretty good company.
No, it
pretty
is
good company, because we're talking about a different era of baseball. Some of the guys that are, right near the top all time played when pitchers didn't come out of games, played before there were, heavy bullpen usage, and you were seeing 3 different arms typically in a game. Ruth, Williams, Gehrig, Oscar Charleston.
Yeah.
The only in the top 10, the only more modern day player in the last 50 years is Barry Bonds, not surprisingly. Mike Trout comes in 11th. Manny Ramirez 12th. Anyhow,
that's a good group. I think for me, I might still be looking too much at the counting stats. And you say, well, he's only had 100 RBI twice. Okay, again, that's we know that counting stat isn't necessarily the fault of the player at the plate if there's nobody on base. But I'm surprised that he doesn't even have 300 home runs yet. He will get there. And again, I think it's just that I'm probably holding him to a much higher standard because of all that hype that's going back now. It's probably about 15 years. Yeah, that's but I got to readjust my calculations here for Mr. Bryce Harper, because he's still been pretty damn good. All right.
He's a Hall of Famer. He's going to be a Hall of Famer.
He absolutely will be. Here we've got 2 Hall of Famers. One that's definitely a Hall of Famer because he's in, and one that will be very shortly on the list. It's Frank Thomas and Ichiro Suzuki. Frank Thomas was 49, Ichiro 46. So they're right next to each other. Between those 2 guys, what's your first inkling on who had a better career, the Big Hurt or Ichiro Suzuki?
Again, I'd have to look at that. Completely different players, as we know. One guy you want leading off, and one guy you want in batting third, typically in your lineup, because Frank Thomas was a guy that not only hit for power, clearly, he also hit for average. He's one of the all-time great hitters who hit a lot of home runs. And so he feels like a top 50 player. And Ichiro is a freak. One of the great arms in baseball, blurring speed, unbelievable hand-eye coordination. When you combine what he did in Japan, more hits than anyone, including Pete Rose. So yeah, talent-wise, I think both are, this is just off the top of my head. if you say top 50, which is what ESPN had them in, I say, yeah, that doesn't feel, in it all out of place.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think where they rank is right there. And it's hard if you're saying, hey, who had the better career? Because as you said, yeah, they're two totally different. You got a power hitter who did hit for average, had a career 301 batting average, the Big Hurt did. And you have a guy who certainly wasn't a slap hitter, because that might be a little bit demeaning, but a guy who, isn't known for his power, did hit over 10 home runs, 3 different times in his career, did have an MVP, was Rookie of the Year and MVP. In 2001 in Ichiro, whereas Frank Thomas had the back-to-back MVPs. And so even if you just looked at what Ichiro was able to do in America, it's very close. But if you throw in his play over in Japan and what could have been if he had been able to play in America at 20, 21 years old, I think you might have had Ichiro much higher on this list. Because as you said, you combine his play in NPB as well as MLB, he's got the most hits of any human being all time on any planet, as far as we know.
The planets that we're aware of that are baseball playing planets, that's a true statement. Frank Thomas, by the way, had the OPS list out, 974 OPS all time, 17th. And Larry Walker is right next to him at 18th all time. So let me double check that. Yep, Frank Thomas is 17th, Larry Walker's 18th.
Yeah, 156 OPS plus for the Big Hurt. So he was there. And again, you say, well, he was a DH, towards the last part of his career and whatnot. But
good hands early in his career. He had good hands early in his career when he hit first base.
Listeners of the pod will know the answer to this trivia question. Drew, first base hit for Frank Thomas was a triple. Do you know who it was off of? Look on your face. Well, again, contextual. If you listen to the podcast for more than one reason, not just because it's just a random thing, it's connected to our show, to a couple of guests that we've even had this week and last week. You had a question for him last week.
I did.
I was about to have him on, and I said, "Hey, you got anything for this guy?"
Oh, that's right. You asked me to remember a week ago now. I do remember this conversation. All right, go ahead. This is bad podcast. Me with my hand. I do this all the time with my hand, wrapped around my head trying to remember.
The frustrating look. Yeah, we might have to turn you into a meme here, Drew. Is that look on your face? Got to go to the DNVR Sports channel over on YouTube to see that reaction. Mr. Mark Knudsen, first career hit was a triple from Frank Thomas.
Yeah, that's right. I think I
saw that online.
He started the whole thing, didn't he?
But I gave him credit because I think it was like a rope-a-dope situation where he wanted to tire him out and say, all right, well, I'll let you hit this triple. And then, you're going to be trying to catch your breath for the next, 18 seasons of your career. And so who knows how great Frank Thomas would have been if Mark Knudsen didn't play a little game of chess and forced him into that triple.
Yeah, if he doesn't give up a hit, maybe he gets sent out and he never returns.
Another what-if situation there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ichiro's legendary. I'd be curious, what if for Ichiro if he was still playing? Like, I'd be curious to see how well he could do on the field, because he's still got it. Have you seen those clips of him, coaching, different teams, and he'll be at home plate and he can, knock a milk bottle off the right field fence. He's amazing.
The thing with the bats, if he was playing in the big leagues today, he would not be the worst player in the big leagues.
No, he wouldn't. Now, again, you can't even remember what we talked about less than a week ago, but do you remember that game with, at least maybe not all the specifics, but the buzz in the ballpark for that series against Miami where Ichiro was going into it, needing that one more hit, and he nearly got it the night before. I think that was a night game where I think he came in as a pinch hitter, got a hit, stayed in the game, and then had one more at bat. And then he finally got it on the day game, with the triple. And I think there was a lot of media that was in the house. I was there in right field as a fan. I hadn't started working for DNVR, so I can actually watch the clip. And I'm wearing a light blue baseball cap, and you could see me. I was the first one who stood up because I go, the ball's coming this way. I didn't jump over the railing like that one guy did who got ejected, but I can point to myself in that clip. What do you remember from that day, or at least just how special of a moment that was to call a player's 3,000th hit? Because it hasn't happened very often.
No, I mean, it's neat whenever something like that occurs, and you have immense respect for a guy that's able to accumulate that number of hits, especially Ichiro's story coming over from Japan. And I mean, this is a guy that that bat, kind of like we always talk about the late Tony Gwynn. It was a magic wand. He had a unique style, more of that Far Eastern style where he almost looks like he's running to first before he swings. But he was able. He was like Gumby, man. He was able to keep his hands back and still, drive the outside pitch the other way, even though it seemed like he was halfway to first base. We know many stories about the fact that he had a ton of power. I witnessed it in batting practice, legit power. And just like Tony Gwynn, that it was said in Wade Boggs as well, that had they focused on just hitting the ball over the wall, they could have been 30 home run guys instead of guys that, would hit some home runs, but, hit for, an exceedingly high average. So yeah, it's special. I think I'm privileged enough to have been behind the mic on that one. I think back to being in Houston with the Rockies when Craig Biggio had a 5-for-5 day that included his 3,000th hit. Those are big time milestones, as we know, in a sport that so embraces and cherishes the numbers in the game. So you do remember, those points in time.
People definitely remember from last week on the Drew Goodman podcast, Tony Alford. And again, a lot of people know him. He's one of those Colorado guys, has a lot of ties to this area. He's back this week for part 2 of the conversation on the Drew Goodman podcast, which drops on Thursday. I know you've got all your takes on the Olympics, Super Bowl. What are some of the great takeaways that we're going to hear in that interview? Because the first part was already fantastic about, the perseverance that he's had to overcome in his career. And so, more pearls of wisdom for Tony Alford over there at Ohio State.
Well, I mean, Tony talks about, being a longtime assistant coach, and, we talk about the Brian Flores, lawsuit and, Tony at times, I think being passed over. We talk about, and again, Tony's a really humble guy, and he's very appreciative of where he is and where he's been, and he lives in the moment. But the impact that he's had on guys, and what we talk about, the new recruiting world, which is, I think, a fascinating topic nowadays.
Yeah,
and especially when you talk about a guy who's recruiting to one of those elite schools, the handful, that have separated themselves the last few years that really have a legitimate chance, as Patrick, year in and year out, to win a national championship. The Alabamas, the Georgias, the Clemsons, the LSUs. I know they were down this year, but Ohio State. And they're really maybe the only northern school that you can make that statement. And Tony's in the middle of it. So we talk a lot about that. And again, the NIL and the transfer portal. And we get into Joe Burrow. Remember, Joe Burrow was at Ohio State. So we talk about that. Personally, I'll reflect a little bit on some of the Super Bowl, stuff, maybe a little bit more Olympic stuff. But, we'll have fun. And again, I thought the interview with Tony was compelling enough, and we just went on, and that we had to split it into 2 parts. So I think people will derive a lot out of part 2 as well and find it interesting.
Yeah, plenty of relevance. It's not just, hey, here's someone that I know and it has the connections. Like you said, all of these topics that are going around and buzzing in sports, he touches on all of those. So that's a must listen and must download, as it is each and every week on the Drew Goodman podcast. Drew, this has it's been real. It's been fun. And it has been real fun too. I think we can say that.
Yeah. I didn't get my trivia question fixed this week. So next week I need some more trivia, because I always look forward to my my Patty Lyons trivia question. Questions, plural.
I'll give you one quick one.
Okay.
On Monday, it was the 30th anniversary of which radio station signing a 5-year deal to broadcast the Colorado Rockies.
I think I got that one. A radio station that when they signed that deal, I was affiliated with, KOA, the 50,000 watt blowtorch.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
Now you got a streak. We're going to build off of this streak now. 1 for 1. Let's keep it going.
Do you remember the initial 2 announcers on the radio side for the Rockies?
When you say the names, I'm going to remember it. Actually, I feel like there were 3 guys. Wasn't there 3?
There was 2, unless I'm messing up. No, there were 2.
Okay.
Wayne Hagan.
Yes, that's the big one I should have gotten.
And Jeff Kingery, who had come over from the Nuggets. So those were the 2 original, radio announcers. Wayne Hagan was the lead, and Jeff Kingery. And then, Wayne ended up moving on to St. Louis at one point, and that's when Jack Corrigan came over. Jack had been in Cleveland. And then when Jeff retired, that's when Jerry Schimmel, who also was doing the Nuggets, came over. So there's actually 3, because if I guess include myself, there's 3 guys that have broadcast the Rockies, whether it be radio or television, that were involved with the broadcasting of the Nuggets at one point as well.
There you go.
There you go.
It's the history.
The more you know, the less you know when you listen to me. So.
It's trivia, it's history, it's all rolled into one. That's what we're bringing here. It's fantastic. Make sure you're following Drew over on @DrewGoodman42 on Twitter. All our great Rockies content at @DNVR_Rockies. 50 cents for your first month at thednvr.com. I'm at Patrick D. Lyons on Twitter. For DNVR Sports, he's Drew Goodman. I'm Patrick Lyons. This has been fun, but you know what they say about momentum? It's only as good as your next podcast. So I'll talk to you then.